Welcome. I'm Julie Bacon, and you're listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast, a podcast for dog handlers who are on a mission to achieve big goals. Here I share lessons, insights, personal stories, and tools you can apply during your next show, trial, or test to help you strengthen your mental game and hopefully cue more consistently. Be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find details about the episodes, plus important links, including the link to the Dogged Planner and Workbook created just for handlers on a mission. So if you're ready to improve your competitive mindset, get out of your own way, and connect with your dog like never before, then it's time to get comfy, bring an open mind, and work your mindset. Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. All right, today I'm calling the post-success hangover, and it's the thing that happens once we have something great happen, and then we're like, now what? And this could be, just a really great weekend that you had. It could be a really great whole event that you have, and you're like on Monday morning, you're like, okay, like now what? Like, do I even feel like training? Like, I don't even know what to do with myself. Like, I did the thing I really wanted to do, or maybe just exceeded my own expectations in some way. And like, now what do I do? And I'm also seeing this happen a lot with goal setting right now because, beginning of the year, January, setting new goals, wanting to do new things. And a couple of my clients are like, I didn't really think I'd get as far as I did. And now I don't know what to do next. Like, where do I go from here? What is the next goal? What is the next thing? Is it enough to do the same thing again, i.e. show consistency and be able to do it, whatever the thing is again, or are there new challenges, new goals? And so some of us have this like unsettled feeling, or just maybe even not motivated feeling, instead of being excited. Okay. So it's kind of a weird like dichotomy, confusion, however you want to think about it. But it's like you have pride about what you did, but then you also have this weird discomfort that exists at the same time because you're not really sure what's next or like what happens now. And it is super common. Actually, several of my coaching calls already this year have been with people who are like, hey, I had a great year or a great event or a great trial or whatever. And now I don't really know where I go next. I didn't really know what the next level is. So super common. And also I want to stress, this is not some form of ingratitude, right? It doesn't mean you're not grateful. You're not super proud. It doesn't mean you're not happy. It just means that you're in that zone of kind of what's next. It is also not a lack of motivation. It doesn't mean you don't want new things. It doesn't mean you don't want to level up. It just means that you're not sure what the next step is. And the next step is very easy I started to say fix. It's not really a fix, but it's very easy to figure out just the one next step, right? So kind of the way I would put it is if you had a good year or a great event or something and feel kind of oddly off right now, then you're not broken and you are in the right place, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Okay. The other thing I want to say, and of course the Olympics are on the horizon again. And if you've listened to me long enough, I'm obsessed with Olympic elite sort of athletes in all the sports and just their mental preparation and all of that. If you hear Olympic athletes like after, like kind of like right after an Olympics or right if they decide to retire or things like that. Michael Phelps is a really good example of like once there wasn't swimming in his life or the next Olympics on the horizon, he was really lost. Like he mentally struggled, struggled with, made some not great life choices even, I think he says, and he just really struggled. So this is a super normal thing, of course, probably the greater the high, the greater the low kind of a thing in terms of extremes, but it's that common. Like, Olympic athletes, you can probably find a bunch of interviews on YouTube about Olympic athletes struggling with this in terms of the like, well, I did the thing I set out to do. Now what's next? Okay. So I think we have generally this expectation that success is going to just equal confidence, momentum, clarity, and it's sort of never ending, right? It's sort of this never ending well. And the reality is sometimes success creates a pause. It creates a moment of reassessment and to really figure out like, oh, what is next? What are my goals? What is the next thing I want to do? How do I take it up a level without just getting another puppy, which of course is always an option. But that's not always the option. Okay. But sometimes we even experience like a drop, or an emotional flatness, or, our performance even can take a dive because we don't have the same intensity or the same focus or just the same, even clarity around it. So even though we think success equals confidence, momentum, and clarity, that success can also get to like a kind of a funny place. Like think of it, now you're at the top of the mountain. Now what do you do? Now what do you do? And you might be looking at yourself like, yeah, but I'm not really at the top of the mountain. I'm not like the best that ever was, but I just accomplished all my goals. Same. It's the top of your mountain. Okay. We're not comparing with other people's mountains or successes or Facebook brags on Monday, right? We are only about our journeys, right? So that's why I'm calling it kind of like a post-success hangover, because it is the result of something really fun happening, something really great happening, but it's just this sort of foggy, weird, lost, might need an Advil or two to get you through it. Okay. So it's not like some clinical, I'm not diagnosing anyone, obviously. We're just sort of describing or trying to put vocabulary words around something that is a little ineffable, right? It is kind of hard to describe. So also what happens is if you have a big year or a big event, sometimes then the pressure increases, whether that's real external pressure that is showing up in your environment, or that's the internal pressure that you feel like, oh my God, now I have to do it again. What if it was just a fluke? What if I can't do it again? What if I can't keep going up? What if this is it for me? What if this is the best that there will ever be? Okay. So sometimes having a bunch of success can increase your pressure and then of course make you more nervous. And then of course, it just keeps kind of snowballing into a direction. You're like, wait a minute, how did I get here? I was having such a good time. I had such a good year. Like, why am I now more nervous than I was previously? Okay. The other thing that can happen is, as we keep moving up, right? We keep leveling up, we keep getting better, our comfort level obviously decreases because we're pushing ourselves into that growth zone instead of staying all warm and snuggly in our comfort zone. So our comfort decreases or our discomfort increases, however you want to think about it. And which goes back, of course, to getting comfortable being uncomfortable and almost looking for that level to know that you are pushing. Okay. The other thing that can kind of happen for people is that finishing a long goal, like a marathon goal, like a mock or an arch or, something that takes a long time to get to, sometimes you have all that kind of adrenaline and energy and kind of drumbeat around that goal, that marathon goal. And then all of a sudden then it's quiet, like what happens next? Like, okay, now what? I had a little bit of that last year when I finished even just my rally championship, right? It wasn't, it might not be a mock or an arch, but in terms of like the energy and the effort that it was taking and the, the way it was kind of consuming my thoughts, even to just get it done. And just, there was like kind of an element of relief of it just being done, which I think some of us feel, but it's the quiet that comes afterwards. You're like, oh, okay, now I don't have that thoughts of when the next trial is or when this is or like what points am I at or like how many triples do I need or da-da-da-da-da. All of a sudden there's just nothing. And sometimes that can feel, that quiet is like deafening, right? That you're like, oh, there's nothing going on. I need something going on. All right. So what's really happening here is that we, after a completion like that, we're going to call it, right? The real problem is our identity. Okay. Goals don't just give us something to do, right? They don't just keep us busy. It's not just busy work. They give us structure, right? Having a goal, wanting to do well at the Invitational or the Classic, wanting to have a really great year, wanting to finish a mock, wanting to, achieve, who cares? X, Y, Z, Q, all the alphabet letters. It's not just a to-do. And yeah, the muggle world doesn't really understand, but those of us in the dog sport, we understand. It's more than just something to do on the weekend. It's structure. It guides our days. It informs what trials we're going to enter. It informs, what we're working on training wise during the week. It informs maybe chiropractic massage appointments. It has all of these little like tentacles that go throughout all of the different areas of our lives. So when we have that structure, then the striving for it becomes our identity, right? It gives us direction. It gives us focus. It gives us a sense of who we are when we're in motion toward that goal, all right? So when the goal ends, the structure disappeared, and the identity, who we are, right? Because last week I was this person that was striving for this goal, and now this week I don't know who I am because I haven't kind of reorganized a new identity. I don't have a new sense of self. I don't know who I am without this goal because I'm not sure what I'm working for. I feel, for me, the word I use a lot is untethered. Which is like kind of the opposite of grounded, I guess. I don't feel grounded or tethered or connected to any one thing. So what happens is like we lose when we complete something, the structure goes away, that focus, that what to do next goes away before we have new clarity. And that's the gap. That's the gap. That's the hangover. That's what we feel when we feel fuzzy, lost, not sure what we're doing next. It's the gap between who we were and who we now have to figure out who we want to be. And we're just in that moment where we haven't quite figured that out. So that little gap, that space can feel disorienting. It feels like emptiness, feels like lack of motivation. It feels like I did all the things, now what? And some of us don't even pause long enough to realize that that's what we're feeling. We just push on. If it's the third weekend in January, I must be at XYZ trial because that's where I always am this time of year. We just push on and we don't even stop and think about it, which of course is one of the many reasons, I should say, why I'm obsessed with goals and pausing and thinking through it and figuring out who we want to be and not just doing it once a year, doing quarterly check-ins, for sure doing semi-annual check-ins and just figuring out, am I on the right path? Am I working toward the person that I want to be? Okay. All right. I've got a few more notes on this right when we come back. If you love this podcast, you'll love the Q membership. Each month, we tackle topics like ring nerves, confidence, and mental toughness, breaking them down into bite-sized, actionable lessons. You'll also get a private Facebook group for support and access to all of my online courses. It's like having a mindset coach in your pocket. Ready to get started? Join us. The link is in the show notes or head to theqcoach.com. Back to the episode. Okay, I realized another thing that comes up in this kind of space, I'll say, which isn't necessarily competition related, but it can be like a retirement of a dog, right? Or a dog shifting from one sport, like your dog can't do agility anymore, but you're shifting to scent work, right? I'm personalizing. Or actually, even for Moxie, she's never wants to see another rally ring as long as she lives, but we're transitioning to scent work, right? It's a great old lady sport for her. She's 10. And in Berner years, that's much older than in some of your other dogs. So that's some of the things. So like a dog aging or changing roles, or whether it's for rehab reasons or retirement reasons or whatever, that's another way that we as handlers can feel this, because it's not just about us and our own goals. We're part of a team, and whatever is happening to the team really affects how we feel as well, right? So the other way that handlers really feel this is when we level up. We move up to a new level, but the problem is we have fewer rewards, right? Because we're back in that like uncomfortable area. We're not in our, again, our cozy, comfortable zone anymore. Now we're moving into a growth zone. And the other place that this comes up for us, just sort of, and January is for a lot of us around the country, a good time for this, which is it's just seasonal. There could be like every season when you take a break or you turn the page or whatever. Like for me, a lot of times when I feel this sort of hangover is when I take the summer off, because as you all know, I have Bernese Mountain Dogs. They tend to just burst into flames in July, right? It's just too hot to do anything but swim. So I usually skip July, and that kind of leaves me. Some people will say, well, it's kind of FOMO. Yeah, it's kind of FOMO, but it's just, I'm in this in between, right? Because a season has ended. And in that case, some years, the season of gathering points toward the invitational has just ended. So if we're chasing to get into nationals, or chasing to get in the invitational, or chasing to be invited to whatever, an open, a classics, like sometimes that season, once that chase is over, we feel that like, it almost feels like deflating to me. You're like, oh, okay, now what? And sometimes the break is great. Sometimes you're like, oh, thank God I don't have to go to a trial next weekend. But sometimes you're like, yeah, what do I do? Okay. All of it is still that losing of our identity, that what we were working toward has either stopped because we got there, or it's on a hiatus. Okay. So you can have this feeling in those in between times, which again, a lot of people take, the winter off or January off because of weather and different things. And nobody likes to drive around a rear wheel drive van in the winter. So I get that. Okay. So we want to think about how our discomfort in this moment can actually remind us to connect back to goals and figure out next steps, and realize that it is just a season and we are just in the in-between, but also not to necessarily just rush forward into the what's next. There is that moment where we do need to review the year that happened, go back through your planners and go back through the whole year and see like what kind of notes you left yourself back in March. Like, how can you celebrate how far you came? How can you savor the year, sort of remember it? Are there photos you need to go buy? Are there, things that you need to do? Because rushing forward is a form of coping. It is a coping mechanism for a lot of people, myself included. Okay. Like if we just keep moving forward, then we're never dealing with any of these emotions, right? We're never dealing with these like moments of, not clarity, and just in confusion, or being insecure, or not knowing what's next. Okay. And that forward motion also then, by avoidance perhaps, but also it just provides us a little bit of emotional relief, because we identify as a handler who needs to be doing something in order to feel validated. Okay, if I'm working on it, if I'm going to class, if I'm doing stuff, okay, I must be doing, I'm doing something. Whereas in truth, you could just be spinning your wheels, doing the same old stuff, going to the same old classes, but not doing it with intention or with a goal. So you are just spinning. Feels a little bit like Fred Flintstone trying to take off in his little car, right? You're just, but not really going anywhere. Okay. So to have this pause requires kind of some emotional tolerance, right? And a little bit of emotional maturity to just sort of sit with what's uncomfortable. I think January, the month, the darkness of it, the shorter days, the cold, the weather, the no leaves on the trees, at least where I am, all of that kind of adds to the moodiness of it, really. And so now not only are we feeling it inside, we wake up and it's cloudy outside and there's no leaves on the trees and it's dark at 4:30, and it just sort of adds to it. Okay. So there's a lot of things working, I don't want to say against us necessarily, but kind of almost carrying the emotions that we're feeling even further than maybe if it was a bright sunny day in July. Okay. So again, it's not wrong. It's not weak. It's just our nervous system doing what our nervous systems do. Okay. So let's reframe this, right? Because obviously we don't want to just be like, okay, wallow, wallow, wallow. Now what do I do? Now I'm good and depressed from listening to this podcast episode. Now what? Okay. Well, I don't want you to be depressed or sad or whatever, but I do want you to sit there and kind of process and realize what you're feeling, and realize that you could be having a momentary identity crisis. And a momentary of like, okay, great, it was push, 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 go, 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 work, work, work. And now what? Okay. So be a little bit gentle with yourself. Use this moment as a time of reflection to get yourself out of it and to not wallow or, just go all doom and gloom and get the whole seasonal affective disorder just really in full swing. To avoid all that, which would be good, have a sit down, write down like your journal. You can just journal it out, stream of consciousness, how you're feeling. That works really well for a lot of people. Again, as usual, the worst part of that exercise is pen to paper. It's just starting, but just write stream of consciousness. Even if your first line is, I don't know what I'm supposed to write. Crazy lady on the podcast says that I'm supposed to write about my feelings about last year and about my goals of where I'm supposed to go. Okay. So even if that's where you start, that will get you going. And then you can say the honest things to the paper about like, now what do I do? Or I'm nervous about my puppy, or what if I don't get a puppy this year, or da 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 da. Just say all the things to the paper. Okay. Let it all go somewhere, because you don't let it go somewhere, it just runs around in your brain and shows up at really inopportune times. Okay. The other thing is of course, once you get through sort of some savoring of last year, some reflection on what's running around in your brain, then start to think about like, how am I going to reorganize my identity? Who do I want to be this year? Maybe I have accomplished most of my goals, but now I want to show up as more thoughtful handler, or I want to smooth out my handling, or, there's some ways that maybe not necessarily, it's not really about titles and outcomes so much as it about me being a quote, better handler, whatever better means to you. And you got to be able to define it in order for it to count as a real goal. But better I could tell you what better handling means, right? For me in agility, it's definitely smoothing things out. I always tend to be a little jerky, so I'm always really trying to go for that, that graceful look, even though it's not what I know I truly look like out there. But we can dream. And so I'm always trying to smooth that out. And in obedience, I'm trying to, just get better at cueing my dog, because obviously the problem is me. So I just want to improve that, and always want to be more supportive to my dog and help my dog more. Okay. Not help that, you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, even though I do love a good tangent. Okay. So the other thing to realize here is your takeaway is nothing needs to get decided today. Okay. But I just want you to realize that you're in the gap. You're in this really uncomfortable moment, in this in between. You're in this moment between who maybe you were and who you're going to be next year. The cool thing is you get to decide. All right. So if you're looking at your journal and you're looking at a blank page and you're wondering what the heck to write, then ask yourself, what part of last year actually ended and hasn't been reorganized yet into the next goal? Okay. Because sometimes when you revert back and you ask yourself, okay, well, what is it that came to an end, that came to a close? It feels like it had a period on the end of the sentence and is done. And how did I identify with that person, and who do I need to identify with going forward? And then that really kind of helps pull you forward and helps you take just one step in a new direction. You don't need to define 27 steps. You just need to define one step. And maybe one step is pulling out your planner and making a plan for, okay, on Tuesday in class or Tuesday when I train, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have some new intention. I'm going to make sure I have intention every time I show up to work my dogs. What have you, right? It just needs to be one step, simple. Make it small so that you can enjoy crossing it off the list, right? And checking it off. We all get a little bit of juice from that. All right. So next week, I am going to kind of build on this. I don't usually do that with podcasts, but I am going to sort of build on this and talk about why when we rush, that the rush itself sort of becomes the problem. But for now, we don't have to worry about that. If you're in between chapters, I just want you to realize that that's all it is. It doesn't mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean anything. Remember, we give the stories. We decide what things mean. And if you're assigning some big meaning to how you're feeling right now in this sort of in between chapters moment, you're probably over dramatizing it, right? I'm just going to put that out there. It probably doesn't mean as much as you're saying, okay? It's just part of the story. The story's changing. A chapter is changing. It's moving on to the next thing, to the next iteration, the next level, whatever, okay? So in other words, it's not that big a deal. It's so normal, and it's happening to all of us, and it is kind of very seasonal. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a little bit of support, a little bit of clarity, and I hope it gives you a lot of bit on what to do next. And with that, no matter what you're up to this week with your dogs, I hope you have a fantastic time. Thanks so much for listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast with me, Julie Bacon. I am so grateful for your precious time. Check out my Dogged Planner workbook and journal available on Amazon. Just search for Dogged Planner. I also offer monthly membership that's perfect for ongoing support of your awesome goals. Check out theqcoach.com for details, or just stop by and check out all the ways you can work on your mindset. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at theqcoach and let me know how it's going. Finally, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps us podcasters tremendously. Plus, I know I get my best podcast recommendations from friends. Thanks, and have a great week with your dogs.